Chapter 7. Not doctors. Turns out the paramedics themselves were okay, but the driver of the car was in critical condition. The other man had Emerson work on him, her hands covered with blood that wasn't hers. "Hematoma's recollecting," she muttered, more for Peter than anything else. "I thought you fixed him," the man loudly exclaimed, waving his gun around. "He needs medical attention," Emerson retorted as Peter took over the care. She hated that he was preventing the other man to get the help he needed, even though they kidnapped them. "Isn't that your job?" "We're paramedics, not doctors. You need to get him to an ER," Peter answered, raising his hands when the man pointed his gun towards his face. "This is your fault anyway, that smart-ass stunt. Fix him, or I'll put a bullet in your head." His words sent shivers running up Emerson's back. When she came to Chicago, this was definitely not what she was expecting. "This lump on your buddy's neck is due to internal bleeding. As it grows, it presses on his trachea, and that's what's causing the difficulty in breathing. It's only going to get worse." Peter tried to reason. "So cut it open again." As they continued pointlessly discussing, Emerson observed the man's state, trying to figure out her next move. "That's only a temporary fix. Look, you're going to die unless you get this bleed tied off. You need to get to the hospital." Peter tried speaking directly to the man on the makeshift operating table. "We might as well waltz into a police station." The man with the gun answered. "No hospitals," the driver said, breathing hard as his phone started ringing. "Don't answer it, not if we're giving him bad news." He weakly spoke as he handed it off to his partner. "Can't you guys tie off the bleed?" he asked nervously. "No." "Maybe." Emerson and Mills spoke at the same time, the woman's eyes widening as she heard her partner's words that were most definitely contradicting hers. "What, Mills? That's surgery." She spoke in a warning tone, uneasy with the fact that he wanted to do this. "Look, if we do this, will you let us go?" The man thought about it for a couple of seconds, pondering options. "Okay, deal." Peter turned around to stand on the other side of Emerson, who scoffed and grabbed his arm as if to stop him. "No, we are just paramedics. All we have is a first aid kit. All we do is make an incision and clamp the bleeding. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to save his life." Mills pushed while Emerson glared at him, the phone ringing once again in the man's hands. This time, he answered it. "No way he lets us go," she told Peter in a hushed tone. "He's not in charge." Peter looked her in the eyes before glancing down at the man on the table. "You are, right?" "I just want to get out of here," the man simply answered. "Well, we have a deal?" the second man asked as Emerson subtly shook her head at Peter, praying he wouldn't say yes. Yeah, we have a deal." Jay was still on scene when Truck 81 and Squad 3 arrived to extract the car from the trailer it was crushed under. As he saw it being pulled out, he felt a pinch in his heart, wondering what state Emerson and Peter were in. "Trunk's clear," Mouch called out as Jay walked up to Gabby and Matt. "Jay," Gabby greeted. "Hey, Gabby." Jay greeted her back, nodding at Matt. She glanced at the car in front of them, pleading, "You gotta find them." "We're trying," he assured her, most likely just as worried as they all were. "Hey guys, I got some blood here," Kelly called, pointing at the blood which still looked quite fresh. "All right, at least one occupant is injured. Maybe they didn't get too far," Jay stated, talking to the detective next to him. Come here, come here, come here." He called out, gathering every officer on site around him. "I want a tight perimeter, I want a canine unit, and I want a door-to-door search of the entire neighborhood. If you see anything you think might be out of place, I want to hear about it," Jay ordered, dismissing every police officers so they could get to work immediately and hopefully find the paramedics as soon as possible. "All right, let me have the knife," Peter called as he heard Emerson pouring alcohol all over it, trying to make it as clean and sterile as possible. Right as he was about to make the incision, the man on the table weakly raised his gun in his face. "Hey, better set the gun aside." The other man took it from him, letting Mills get to work. "This is going to hurt like a lot, okay? I'm going to go quick," the man yelled out as he made the cut across the skin on his neck. That was the easy part. "Hey, what happened?" the second man yelled out worriedly when his friend stopped yelling in pain. "What did you do?" "It's okay, he just passed out," Emerson told him simply, focusing back on helping Mills. The man walked away, giving Emerson the opportunity to speak to Mills privately. "Clamp it here," she told him, pointing at the carotid. "You do realize what that will do?" Peter asked, frowning as he looked between her and the man. She nodded, using her fingers to trace "let him die" with the red liquid that covered her digits. "What's the holdup?" the man asked impatiently, finding that they were a little too quiet for his liking. "We're getting there." Peter told her, and Emerson hit the table subtly to remind him off what she wanted him to it. In response, he glared at her and turned the clamp towards her. It made her back off slightly because he knew just as much as she did that she wouldn't do it. It wasn't like them to just let someone die, no matter how bad they were. We're just clamping it off now." Peter took a deep breath, nodding at her, before grabbing a blade out of the retractable blade knife and handing her the other one. She grabbed it, looking into his eyes as she shoved it up her sleeve. "All right, you need to find someone to suture him up, but he's gonna live." Emerson cleaned off the written words as soon as the clamp was placed with her dirty hand. "Good," the man said, rushing towards Emerson. "You, come here." "No, hey," she yelled, trashing around in his grip as he pulled her away from Mills. "I need her," he simply stated, making sure Peter kept his distance and his arms raised. "What are you doing? We have a deal," she exclaimed, mad that he wasn't holding up his end even though she called it first. "I gotta make sure he's okay first," he said, putting a zip tie on her wrists again as Peter worked on the man who was just coming to. "There, he's okay," she spat, making him turn around to look at his partner. "The deal was, we fix him up and you let us leave," Emerson loudly said, getting angrier and more scared by the second. "I know what the deal was." "Then honor it." Emerson spat back at him, not knowing that Jay was right on the other side of the door, listening in order to know if they were inside or not. The man rushed to Peter as Emerson kept trying to distract him so she could cut her zip ties. She knew there was a gun on the table right next to her that she could use. "Vic, you said you'd rein in your partner, so how about it? Will you shut up?" "I knew we couldn't trust you to," she spat, using the opportunity of him being turned around to grab the gun and point it at him. "Drop the gun," she called, all of them turning around towards her. "I said drop it." He raised his own gun right away, and Mills pushed it out of the way, right in time for the bullet to fly elsewhere than straight into Emerson's head. Peter once again fought him off as Emerson ran off, her partner following closely behind. They ran into another room, locking the door behind them only to realize that they were stuck with no way out of that room. The man tried kicking it in after putting a few bullets through it. Right as the door flew off its hinges, Emerson heard a voice she knew over her rapid heartbeat ringing in her ear. "Chicago PD, don't move," he yelled out. "Drop your weapon. Do it." His voice was coming closer and closer, and they saw the man bend down and drop his gun. "Get on the ground. Put your hands up over your head." He let the other detective cuff him. "Mills? Weller?" Jay called out, waiting for them to walk out. Mills dropped the metal pipe he grabbed earlier, rushing out of the room with Emerson close by. "Yeah, in here," Mills assured, letting him know they were okay seconds before they were both in sight. Emerson couldn't feel anything with all of the adrenaline rushing in her veins, but she knew she was grateful to everyone who participated in her rescue at that moment. Her eyes were filled with tears as they fell on Jay's reassuring one. She felt her feet bringing her to him, her arms enveloping him into a hug while his own brought her closer as they wrapped around her waist. "You're okay? We got you," he whispered in her ear, hoping it was good enough to reassure her. He could feel her hands trembling around him, and her breathing was definitely unheaven, so he tightened his grip and waited until she was ready to let go. Eventually, she pulled away from him, inhaling deeply as her troubled eyes met his. Emerson exhaled as she felt her whole face and body relax, realizing that she was safe, all thanks to everyone around her. Her hands dragged down his arms, squeezing his biceps before she completely let go. As soon as she turned around, she was met with her new Firehouse 51 family, each of them bringing her into their arms to welcome her back to the safe side of things. As she hugged Peter, thanking him for trying to keep her safe the whole time, her eyes fell on Jay's blue ones again. He was simply standing by, observing her and waiting for everyone to reunite before even thinking about leaving. "Thank you," she mouthed to him. His only response was a nod and a smile, just glad that it was all over. "We have numerous witnesses saying they saw you make a serious threat against Peter Mills," Jay stated. Anthony Lullo sitting in front of him in the interrogation room. "My son was dead. I was upset." "Yeah, that certainly squares with the eyewitness statements," Jay answered, picking up the file he prepared prior to the interrogation. Mr. Lullo was livid, full of rage, frothing at the mouth. He quoted, looking at the man as he waited for him to react to what was said. Jay was well aware Emerson and Peter were watching from the other side of the two-way glass, almost like he was feeling their eyes burn through the back of his head. "Look, I went over there and I apologized to Peter Mills, and he accepted my apology. He's a good kid." "So you no longer blame Mills or his partner for the death of your son?" Jay questioned, skeptical. "I don't understand what's going on here. I thought you caught the men that took those paramedics." "We caught 2 of them, yeah, so far." "And you think it goes deeper?" "It always does, you know. It's like an iceberg," Jay answered, a light smirk on his face, as if he was trying to let the man know he knew he was the one behind it. "You know, I don't want to tell you how to do your job here, but shouldn't you be talking to the guys you caught and find out what they know?" Jay didn't answer him, but his silence was more than enough for Anthony Lullo. He scoffed, a stupid smile on his face. "They're keeping their mouths shut, aren't they?" A smirk appeared on Jay's lips, who once again stayed quiet. He eventually got up when he figured the man wouldn't say anything more and left the room. Mills and Emerson followed him back to the bullpen, both of them confused about what just happened. "What is going on in there?" "He's walking all over you." Peter snapped at Jay angrily. "Maybe I should smack him around a little bit?" Jay sarcastically suggested, turning around to face them as he stood behind his desk. "Mills, he's here on his own volition. We don't have anything on him," he informed him, sounding slightly defeated. Jay felt for the paramedics. Hell, one of them had become somewhat of a friend to him. He was worried about her. But that's the thing about his job. If you want things done right, sometimes they hit a wall. Those guys had a cell phone. They had to be calling somebody. Yeah, it was a pay-as-you-go phone. It was registered to Johnny Cash in the middle of the Indiana sand dunes. Jay told Mills, trying to get him to understand there was sadly a limit to what he could do. He had nothing that even suggested Anthony Lullo was behind this. There wasn't much else he could do. Emerson simply stood back, wishing there was something she could do. "If I could just talk to the older guy, Vic, the guy that we saved, I know. I already told you he refuses to see you." The detective spoke clearly. "Now, if you visit that guy in the lockup, he could get branded a snitch. A guy like that, he's going to gladly do hard time before he rats on someone of Lullo's stature." "So we can't do anything," Mills spat, slightly angered that there wasn't anything else to do. "We will handle it from here," Jay stated, ending the conversation abruptly. Peter Mills turned around and walked out of the bullpen as Emerson was still trying to figure out if there was something she could say or do to help either Peter or Jay. But nothing came out of her mouth as her eyes followed her partner's back until he completely left the room. She exhaled heavily as soon as she heard the gate downstairs opening and closing, turning to look at Jay. "I'm sorry for Mills." Emerson trailed off, speaking up again before Jay even could. "It's just, those guys were going to kill us, Jay. I had a gun to my head all that time, hours and hours, just waiting to die if I as much as moved the wrong way. Peter, and I, just doesn't want Anthony Lullo to get away with that." Jay nodded, looking at her with empathy. "I understand that, really. I'll try and figure something out to get him." Emerson sent him a grateful smile. "That's all I can ask. Thank you, Jay." She shortly reached for his hand, squeezing it before bidding him goodbye and walking out of the district so she could head back home. The next day on shift, Connie walked up to Emerson and Peter as they were eating breakfast. They had just been discussing the fact that Vic finally agreed to talk to Peter, although he told her that it didn't do anything good. She exhaled heavily as soon as she heard the gate downstairs opening and closing, turning to look at Jay. "I'm sorry for Mills." Emerson trailed off, speaking up again before Jay even could. "It's just, Those guys were going to kill us, Jay. I had a gun to my head all that time, hours and hours, just waiting to die if I as much as moved the wrong way. Peter, and I, just doesn't want Anthony Lullo to get away with that. Jay nodded, looking at her with empathy. I understand that, really. I'll try and figure something out to get him. Emerson sent him a grateful smile. That's all I can ask. Thank you, Jay. She shortly reached for his hand, squeezing it before bidding him goodbye and walking out of the district so she could head back home. The next day on shift, Connie walked up to Emerson and Peter as they were eating breakfast. They had just been discussing the fact that Vic finally agreed to talk to Peter, although he told her that it didn't do anything good. I'm not mad at you. Emerson immediately cut him off, looking down at the hula dancing shark in her lap. Then why can't you look me in the eye? She paused and took a deep breath before finally looking up at him. Because of what you must think of me. I asked you to let a man die. That's messed up. Her eyes watered as she spoke, having trouble believing she truly did that. She had to admit that she didn't sleep too well the night before. Her thoughts kept going back to the horrible day she had. Those guys were going to kill us. Well, you knew that, and you didn't let it cloud your moral judgment. I mean, I am a first responder. A thought like that is never supposed to enter my mind. She admitted, showing the shame she felt to her partner for the first time since it happened. You wouldn't be human if it didn't, Peter stated calmly, letting her know he did not feel how she thought he did. I gave you the chance to clamp off that carotid, and you didn't take it. That's all that matters. Before she could even answer, the alarm blared through the firehouse and off they went. Engine 51, Truck 81, Squad 3, Ambulance 61, structure fire. As they were loading the ambulance back up after the call, Emerson got a call. She grabbed her cell, the movement catching Peter's attention. It's Halstead, she told him before answering the call. Hey, what's up? Hey, is this a good time? He asked, holding the phone against his ear, and he filled up the paperwork, sitting at his desk. His heart was pumping in his chest at the thought of breaking the news to the paramedic. Yeah, of course, she answered, noticing Mills carefully listening as he impatiently waited to hear what Detective Halstead was calling her for. I just wanted to tell you that somehow Vic agreed to talk to us, and, we were able to arrest Lullo, Jay said, hoping his words brought her the peace she deserved. He couldn't even imagine how she must have felt in the past 24 hours. He heard her let out a sigh of relief through the phone, a weight falling off her shoulders. No way. Yeah, so it's over. You're both good and out of the woods. She chuckled. Oh, my. Okay, yeah, this is amazing to hear, Jay. Thank you so much. I'll let Peter know. I'll leave you to it then. Stay safe. Hey, Jay, she called right before he hung up. He hummed through the phone, letting her know he was listening. I owe you a drink.